Hey guys, today we're going to talk about something important, which is the local administrator on the machine. Who is the administrator on the machine? When you install Windows 10 on the machine by default, as part of the installation, it will ask you to create a username, specify who's the user who's using the machine. When you add that user, in my case, it's a student. Once I added that user become by default a local administrator on the machine. So that user has the ability to become an administrator. So how do I know this? I'll go to the machine. Good. I'll go to this computer, right click, I go to manage. Good. But before I go to manage, I just want to show you that this machine is not part of the domain. So I'm going to do right click, I'll go to properties. When I am in properties, the machine is part of the work group, still have its whatever random name. So we didn't join it to the domain yet. Under manage, I will have multiple options here. One of the options called local user and group. So this is the local users and group are on the machine. When I go to this, I have users. So this machine by default have the administrator, have the guest, and have student account that I just created, and have default student account or default account. Notice that the administrator and the default account and the guest account and the WGBA or whatever account, they are all disabled. The only one that is enabled is my account. The administrator account is there. So when you have troubleshooting, you can try to troubleshoot the Windows. That's still there. We will not delete it now, but this is my student. And this is where I can create more accounts. So I can right click here, create a new user. And that user, I will call it, for example, Mahmoud for my son. And I'll give it a password if I want to give it a password. So password1. And user must change the password at next login. No, whatever the options are. Click OK. I created the password, the user. So this is my son. So my son now is a member of that computer. He can use the computer. Good. But by default, I am Hassan. The student is administrator. Mahmoud is not administrator. The account that you create when you are installing Windows is administrator by default. How can I change it? How can I make Mahmoud as administrator on my machine? Here we have the groups. And this is what we call it the local groups in the machine. So in the local groups of the machine, we have two groups. We have administrators and we have users. Users is everybody who's not administrator. Administrator are the administrator. So now if I go here, I double click on student, I'll go to member of, and you can see student is administrator, is member of the administrators group. While if I go to Mahmoud, member of what? Users. So anybody who's member of the user group, he is a user on the machine. He have no admin right. He cannot install software. He cannot uninstall software. He cannot change the time. He is not an administrator. Good. While anybody of the administrator group, he is an administrator on the machine. As simple as this. So when I want to use my machine outside of the domain, I'm still talking outside of the domain, I can create users from here. I can either make them part of local admin group called administrator or not. What's the benefit of giving my employees, make them local admin? If I get my employees in my company as a local administrator, that means they can install software by themselves. What's the benefit of that? They can do it by themselves, they don't have to call me. What's the bad thing about that? Seriously, they're going to do it by themselves and they crash the machines and they come back call me. So it's a decision have to be made by your organization. But in general, this is how we add a name, a user to local group under administrator. So this is about the local machine. This is not about the domain. There is no domain here yet. I'm just talking about the local machine. But that's what we call it, and you have to keep this very careful. We call it local administrators and local users. So these two are local. Local means they are only have effect on the machine where they are sitting in here. Good. So let's close this one. That's machine BC number 5. It's not on the domain. And then I will go to BC number 1, which is part of the domain, to talk about this. So now, when I go to BC1, BC1 is part of my domain. And I can know that by, again, going to this PC, right click, properties. I can see here that I'm part of the domain. Good. So my BC is part of the domain. If I want to go to the manage to see who's administrator on this machine, I will right click on this PC, go to manage. The screen will load. Let me zoom up a little bit so you guys can have better view. And here I have the groups, and you can see I have local group. So it's the same thing exactly as BC5. Not a lot of change. It's still, this is the computer management of the local machine. When I go here in the local machine, I'll open users. I'll find the same accounts, administrator, student, everything is there the same. So where is Mark? Mark is a domain user. The domain user doesn't show up here. Good. These are only the local users. So the student account is still active? Yes, it's still active. What does that mean? That means if somebody knows the password of the student account, he can use it to log into the machine without actually authenticated with the domain. Should I keep it? Of course not. You shouldn't keep it. You should disable it. Otherwise, what's the benefit of me having a domain and me having Mark account and Rima account and all those guys' accounts when those guys can use a local account and they can log in and they have full power on the machine and they don't need or they don't care about the domain settings. That's why we don't do it. We disable it. There is some exception when do we use that. We'll talk about it in the few minutes later. For now, keep it. I don't want to play with it because we might need it in the other classes. Good. So now how do I know where is the administrator? The administrator goes under groups. So when I go under groups, good, I look here, I have users, I have administrators. I double click on the administrator and I found what? I have the administrator and the student. This is the two default accounts that everybody have. Good. And I found on top extra on that who? The domain admins. So remember, this is BC1, it's part of the domain. Let's see BC5 again. So when I look at BC5, oh sorry, that's my domain controller. Here is BC5. Good. When I look at the computer management for BC5, which is again not part of the domain. Good. When I go to the local settings, when I go to group, when I go to administrators, good. What do I see here? Only administrator and student. Good. I don't see domain admin because the machine is not part of the domain. Okay. So that means now, according to this, on the local machine that have no domain, these two accounts are administrator. On the domain machine, on the PC that's joined to the domain, there's still these two accounts are administrators, and if anybody knows the password, he can use it to work on the machine, but we have the extra, the domain admins. So anybody who's member of the domain admin, if he log into this machine, he will become an admin. Good. Somebody will tell me, again, where is Mark? Mark is using this machine. Where is he? Mark is using this machine as a user. So he is member not of the administrator, he is member of the user group. So if I open the user group now, sorry, not administrator, user group. If I open the user group now, here I will find what? I'll find domain users. What does that mean? That means all the domain users are member of the user group. So if Mark login or if Sarah login or Freem login, they will become users. They are not administrator. That's why on this machine, because I am logged in as Mark, good, for example, I will not be able to change the time. If I try to change the time, I will not be able to change the time because I'm not administrator. You see, it's off. I cannot change the time. I cannot do anything about the time. I cannot change it. Okay, if I try to uninstall or install a program, I cannot change it. If I try to go to disk management to format a hard disk or do any of this stuff, let's cancel it. Let's go to here. It will says you don't have the access because you are not administrator. Good. And that's what happened here now. Mark is not an administrator. You see the point? So somebody will tell me then, how are you going to install something on the machine? So if the user sends a request, says, I want to install something on the machine, what do we need to do? We need somebody who is an administrator, somebody who is member of the domain administrator group, like A-Hassan or A-Mido. Those two guys are member of the domain administrator, so they can come and install stuff on the computer. So in that case, for example, we can go here to computer management, and I right click on that, and it says run as administrator. When I click run as administrator, it will ask me who's the administrator. I will tell him it's A-Hassan or A-Mido, any of those two guys that are administrator on my network. Now I'm logged in as administrator. I go under disk management, it will load. I can see it. I'll go under device management, it will load. I can see it. I can update the driver, they change the driver, disable the driver. When I'm logged in as Mark, I cannot see it. So anything you want to run or to install or to do as administrator, you have to do what? Right click, run as administrator. This is how you this is how IT work with the customers. Customer Mark is logged into the machine. IT Hassan come to his table. Let me help you. IT Hassan want to do something. He will right click on that thing and run it as administrator. If Hassan want to install an application on the machine, he will double click on that setup. As soon as he double click on the setup will says you don't have permission, give me permission. He will show the message for Hassan to log in. So this is what's happening. This is how the users usually happen. Good. This is the basic user, the basic work. In the next video, we'll talk more about how do we get that part done.